Thanks for joining today as we talk through the State of QA 2025. We're excited to present you the top insights and the takeaways from this year's edition of TestRail Software Testing and Quality Report. And we'll also discuss what those findings mean and for QA teams and how to act on them for the year ahead. Just briefly introduce myself. My name is João Crisóstomo. I'm Product Marketing Manager here at TestRail. More interestingly, I'm joined by our very own SMB Solution Architect, Chris Faraglia, will be providing his expert insight. And his perspective and opinions will help us tie everything together. So the Software Testing Quality Report is built upon a foundation of feedback and the insights from real QA teams. This year's report was assembled from nearly 3,000 survey responses from both TestRail customers and the QA community at large. The survey covered everything from tooling, processes, to security and compliance, to the team's current challenges and highest priorities for the coming year. And today we'll be diving in to these 4 themes you see on screen. So we'll speak briefly about QA processes, team makeup, and their perceptions, what's changing in QA and what's not, the impact of AI on QA, and we'll go through some 2025 surprises and predictions for the year ahead. Each section will include a little presentation of the insights and takeaways from the report itself, followed by a discussion and expert insights from Chris on how QA teams can leverage these insights. And first up is QA processes, personnel, and perceptions. So we asked teams about their satisfaction with their current testing processes and how and why is that. And exactly how happy they are seems like 78% of respondents are satisfied or very satisfied. A follow-up question that we tried to dig further was to what makes that QA team satisfied. And among the satisfied teams, we have very clear components. So top one would be making test automation a top priority. They value efficiency as a core objective. They focus on increasing test coverage and involving the QA earlier in the development lifecycle. In contrast, the dissatisfied teams, they cite 3 things. One is late-stage involvement, and some teams going through budget and time constraints, and also the difficulty integrating the CI/CD workflows. But we go deeper in the report and thinking about what processes are contributing to that satisfaction or lack thereof. So we see here that Agile remains the dominant methodology across QA teams with 76% of respondents. Scrum is the most common Agile framework, reinforcing the industry's strong preference for iterative, collaborative development. Meanwhile, DevOps and CI/CD continue to hold sizable shares across QA teams, highlighting an emphasis on automation, speed, and delivery efficiency. And despite Agile's foothold in QA, 16% of teams reported using Waterfall, showing that traditional yet sequential models remain relevant for certain industries or risk tolerance. So this mix of methodology reflects the diverse needs of QA teams and underscores the importance of adaptable processes that support both speed and stability. Another interesting point was we try to find out was how are teams growing their human resources alongside their technological processes. And the hiring trends in QA continue to center around core testing roles with a strong emphasis on both manual and automation skills. Manual QA testers were the most commonly hired role in 24, selected by 55% of respondents. And automation test engineers followed very closely with 51%, reinforcing the demand for scalable automated testing practices. We saw also emerging roles like cybersecurity QA specialists and AI and machine learning test engineers that are gaining some traction, though they remain sort of a relatively niche number. Nearly 11% of organizations reported no QA hiring activity last year, citing hiring freezes or even reductions in their QA headcount. This could suggest that while essential roles remain in demand, economic pressures and shifting team priorities are influencing hiring decisions across the board. And to finish us off with this section, despite most teams are hiring for QA roles, staffing remains a key challenge for nearly half of the QA teams. Only 50% of respondents said their teams are appropriately staffed to meet current testing needs. 47% respondents reported that their team is either somewhat or severely understaffed, with 9% reporting severe understaffing. So these numbers reflect ongoing constraints in QA resourcing. While some teams are adequately resourced, nearly half continue to face pressure to do more with less, impacting everything from test coverage to release velocity. Chris, what do you think QA teams and leadership perceive quality as a cost center, as a revenue driver? How can this perception be shifted?
Yeah, this is a great question, Joao. And I work with a lot of our both TestRail clients and pretty in touch with the community and our users. And we definitely see both sides of it. I think it's important to understand that the teams leverage testing to release at the speed of quality or release at the speed of testing. So if we start looking at the ability to get to market faster, have less production bugs, and really use testing as something to drive development agility, that definitely can be a way to have a revenue driver from the idea of our testing, whether it's automation, overall strategy, using test management or tooling and combining that to be a revenue driver versus if we're not really tracking things or we don't have the effectiveness of tests, if leadership or the organization is not seeing that type of shift or agility, it can be thought of more of as a cost center, right? We're not seeing the impact to the market, how quickly and how often we can deliver. So I think that is really the area where we can see the biggest perception shift. And I was just talking to one of our TestRail customers this morning about this exact thing. So really using testing to deliver at the speed of quality, which should be quickly, leveraging good test management, good tooling, and good cohesion, and you can definitely be a revenue driver.
The central keyword you mentioned is clarity, right? If you have the clarity to provide that or the visibility, you can change that perception, hopefully, or at least it can contribute tremendously, right? Providing that
Absolutely.
clarity. Let's moving on to the second theme of today's conversation, which is to examine what's changing in QA year over year, or what's not. Teams expect that automation to make up a larger share of their testing in the coming year. On average, hope to anticipate that 63% of their tests will be automated in 2025. So just to be clear, if you guys can see my mouse kind of rolling around, what you see here is the orange portion of the bar in orange here is the current level of tests that are automated, and 63 is the goal to achieve, right? So there's this red line is the gap between actual and desired goal. So this points us to a continued push toward automation maturity, but adoption still varies, right? With actual automation levels holding steady at the 40% mark for the past 3 years. Some organizations continue to rely on manual testing, often due to legacy systems, complex user flows, or strict compliance requirements that make automation kind of more challenging. However, the trend is very clear. Each year, teams are aggressively moving towards more automation and optimistic in their ability to achieve those goals. Whether 25 will be the year for teams to close the test automation gap remains to be seen. Another year-on-year bit of data is teams are still facing familiar hurdles, so same type of challenges. But this year's data reveal a little shift in the nature of those challenges. So compared to 23, when teams struggled most with automation and basic resourcing, 2024 has brought deeper and more complex issues to the forefront. And what we're seeing here is the most commonly reported challenges now center around tested integrated systems, managing complex environments, and being brought into development too late. Resources limitations are still a concern, but efficiency and process complexity have become more pressing. The most notable jump was in this one, end-to-end testing across integrated systems. This is now the most frequently cited challenge and has grown significantly year over year. And as teams mature in their practices, they are encountering the intricacies of testing distributed systems, APIs, and third-party integrations. So maintaining a stable testing environment and ensuring coverage across interconnected components is becoming increasingly difficult. Meanwhile, developing automated tests dropped significantly as a challenge since the previous year, suggesting that some teams have made progress. However, many still cite tooling limitations, fragile test suites, and skill gaps as key obstacles. So for most, automation is both a goal, as we saw last slide, and increasing that level of automation, but it's also one of the biggest challenges as well. And release frequency continues to vary across teams, reflecting different business models, industry requirements, and levels of DevOps maturity. Over 55% of respondents follow a structured release schedule, mostly common weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. And 15% of teams deploy daily or multiple times a day, highlighting the growing adoption of DevOps and continuous delivery practices. These trends align with broader industry movements toward DevOps and CI/CD, where small continuous updates help teams release faster, reduce risk, and stay aligned with business demands. And last question on this multi-year analysis, when teams were asked to rate the importance of various QA priorities on a 1 to 5 scale, teams consistently emphasized efficiency, coverage, and collaboration over other concerns like outsourcing, stakeholder involvement. The top-rated priorities reflect a practical, quality-focused mindset, and these priorities haven't really changed much year over year. Efficiency is the highest-rated priority across the board. QA teams are clearly focused on streamlining their workflows, reducing bottlenecks, and doing more with limited time and resources. This aligns with other top objectives like we've seen automation and shortening the QA cycles. Ensuring proper test coverage also remains a core concern, especially as teams balance manual and automated testing. And this directly supports the top ranking objective of increasing test coverage. While test automation is still considered important, respondents place more emphasis on executing the right tests than simply creating more of them. So similarly, while Agile and DevOps adoption is a key part of many QA strategies, it's not rated as a top priority, likely because many teams already operate within these models. And lower ranked priorities include outsourcing QA tasks and involving external stakeholders in testing. This suggests that most teams prefer to maintain ownership and direct control over testing responsibilities rather than distributing them across external teams. Chris, in your opinion, which fundamental areas of software testing and quality are actually changing and which aren't?
Yeah, no, this is a great question, Joel. And again, I'm kind of front line with this for a lot of our customers and my involvement in the industry. And I think one of the areas that we're seeing changing a lot are a lot of teams looking at options around traditional test frameworks now transitioning and looking at low code, no code, low code solutions. Under the Semi platform, Ranorex obviously is one of our products that we offer for like a low code solution. There is definitely others. I just did a TestRail partner webinar with TestRigger, which is an AI driven low code solution as well. And we find that a lot of people are using and leveraging low code, no code options significantly more than in the past, where you look at traditional coded solutions like Selenium or Cypress. So that area is definitely changing. The other area I think is not changing and really fundamentally, really, I think is going to get more important is the use and leverage of test data. Test data in all throughout the testing process, whether it be manual or automated, is getting more and more complex and challenging, specifically in high compliance or regulated environments when data can be sensitive. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. I actually see that getting more critical, more complex.
Thank you, Chris. So now let's talk a little bit about AI and its impact in QA and how our team's using it. Perhaps as you guys can expect, AI tools are becoming increasingly integrated in QA workflows, with most respondents leveraging ChatGPT or Copilot for support, especially when it comes to test generation, debugging, and automation assistance. However, the adoption across specialized AI-driven test automation and QA tools remain relatively low and fragmented, suggesting that more industry education and tool maturity are needed. AI-powered defect tracking and management is also underutilized, leaving opportunities for AI-driven predictive analytics and auto triage to grow in importance. And the AI adoption in QA has also delivered mixed results. While it's helping teams work more efficiently by automating some repetitive tasks, it hasn't dramatically changed most QA roles. A significant portion of respondents report success in utilizing AI for efficiency gains, allowing them to automate repetitive tasks and time-consuming work, which then allows human testers to dedicate more time to strategy. Perhaps this year's optimism around automation levels hinges on the promise of AI. We teams hoping that artificial intelligence will take their automation programs to the next level and close the test automation gap for good. We'll see about that. But respondents also report AI improving test accuracy and even some success with advanced AI use cases such as predictive analytics and anomaly detection. Although those use cases are still emerging and adoption remains quite limited. Despite these early wins emerging on the forefront of AI, the largest segment of respondents still report that AI has minimum to no impact on their role. Many in the other category also noted that their organizations have not yet implemented AI or do not allow its use, indicating limited practical use cases. And last, we cannot disregard the fears our respondents reported regarding AI, including the need for upskilling and retraining, and even some uncertainty over the job stability altogether. Even those who are seeing success with AI are facing challenges in its integration. The most frequently cited obstacles include data privacy, security concerns, and followed by a lack of expertise within the team. Additionally, teams struggle with finding suitable AI tools, the complexity of its integration, and the high cost of implementation. Very interestingly, 27% of respondents reported no significant challenge, indicating that AI adoption has been quite smooth for some teams. But despite the challenges, fears, and uncertainties around AI, the vast majority of respondents indicate that at least some level of consideration or active implementation of AI. The largest segment is still in the consideration phase, suggesting that AI in QA is at a tipping point where many organizations are exploring its potential but haven't yet taken concrete steps. But a smaller but significant 9% are fully committed to using AI, signaling a strong shift towards automation and predictive QA methodologies. The true impact of AI in QA is yet to be seen, but QA teams are, I would say, largely optimistic about the promises. The survey respondents express hopes that these advances in AI will transform test automation, defect analysis, and test case and script generation in the coming years. So stay tuned to the Sembi brands for some really exciting updates in this AI space very, very soon. And let's close this AI theme with your expert opinion, Chris. What do you think? AI will impact the future of KPIs and ROI for our teams?
Yeah, I definitely think this is, I get this question a lot, from both TestRail and Sembi product kind of customers, both existing and those that are onboarding. And I think my general response would be, it depends. It depends on how you approach it and what tooling and how you're going to use it. For instance, we have a product called DesignWise, which does test scenario elaboration, right? You leverages AI to greatly expand how your test cases are generated and automatically expands this coverage to get you more scenario coverage. That's something where you can leverage existing tests and get more out of it, right? So that would be an area where you can get immediate ROI and leverage that to impact KPIs like test coverage and maybe measure it for escape bugs in production. Other less, I'll say determinate, AI related things like Copilot driven IDEs or specific tooling. It may be a productivity gain, but it may be not worth ROI in a large sense for a team, and it may be hard to measure. And like I said, TestRail's kind of undergoing this with generative AI in our beta trials in TestRail, for those that are not aware, with our AI features that we're working on. And this is another thing where we can actually do some measurement on productivity and percentage from a team, productivity perspective with TestRail reporting. And that's another thing that's pretty measurable versus really intricate tooling that has AI embedded, but may not really get the value that end users anticipate. So we see it at both ends of the spectrum. My closing thought here would be is select your tooling and understand what you're measuring to really get the most ROI for stuff that you can really measure. But the fact that teams are seeing these is promising. So I think there is some gain to be had.
Thank you, Chris. I think now this is probably the most interesting session of the presentation. I'll hand it over to you as you'll cover some of the surprises we found over with the survey and some predictions for the future, for the near future.
One of the first things here that I found, in my opinion, was fairly shocking, right? With all the advances in automation tooling and whatnot, the test automation gap still remains really wide. We have some of our large clients running thousands and thousands of automated tests, but the vast majority not only have plans to increase automation, but few are running more than 1,000 test cases daily. So we still have a lot of teams that are leveraging manual testing. And, my general comment to this is test automation tooling and ecosystem and knowledge base has never been better. So for those that are on the call, or if you fall in this area, really rethink what tools you're using, leverage tooling and strategy for what we know is working in patterns to really bridge this gap. So this was surprising to me that only 43% plan to increase automation. And really teams, most of them are really running not a lot of tests granted on the scope of size in some of the customer base. So it's something for everybody to think about today is how can they bridge that gap and what tooling and which strategies can you use to change that? So this was surprising to me. The next one here, I wouldn't say it was surprising, but I think it's interesting that manual testing is still a predominant source of validation across our survey results. And again, regardless of both AI and new tooling, 55% of the teams are still focused on really manual-driven test roles. And I think there's a definite fitment in there that, depending on your domain, this may be applicable, but a lot of organizations are relying on manual testing, and I really don't see that changing anytime soon. I think we're going to see a lot of manual testing in certain areas. One of which that I have seen personally is more hardware software V&V, where we're testing both software combined with hardware or physical device integrations. So I don't see manual testing going away by next year or by the next time we do this report. It's going to pivot, and how you utilize tools to make it more efficient is something that I think teams should look at. So we talk about AI, and everybody, admittedly, especially in my role, asks me, Chris, what are the teams doing with AI? What is TestRail doing with AI? Obviously, we're doing our Gen AI-based beta right now, and we'll be moving into a space to offer that here shortly. But most teams using chatbot, open source AI like ChatGPT, they're saying it really doesn't have a lot of impact. And this does not actually surprise me in some areas. In some areas, it also does. I think there's a place for AI, but adoption has really been cautious. And we had a previous slide that Joel talked about. And one of those areas I think that is driving that is the users in regulated industries and data privacy. So obviously, if your teams plan on leveraging that, that's a definite concern. Understand model training and the security and how and where your data is going, right? So that's definitely one area. And then the other area too is how we can actually measure that. We talked about ROI earlier. Using and upskilling, using new tooling and upskilling has cost upfront. And we're still looking at how AI can mature to give us real ROI gains without slowing teams down. We really want to move them forward. So adoption overall still has been fairly cautious. And that's something to think about whenever you're trying to jump in with organizational initiatives to adopt AI. See what that means and what it would take and what type of ROI can we really have, not even on the long term, but the short term. This next slide is a great one, and we talk about this idea of speed. 58% report faster release cycles are actually causing more bugs. And this is a great quote here, and this came from one of our report sources, right? The biggest struggle is meeting release deadlines while ensuring we don't ship defects to production. This is definitely not a surprise, and you'll hear me say, if for those that are TestRail or semi-portfolio customers, and I've been on any calls, integration or support or otherwise, that we really can release at the speed of testing. And that this really solidifies that, right? Because as we go to speed up, we have to manage quality at the same rate as our go-to-market cycles. If we're not doing the proper testing and we're going to accelerate that kind of go-to-market push, production defects and having issues becomes a real problem. And this is really where selecting the right tooling, looking at test management and how you're managing your testing, and having good visibility of that is somewhere that we really can double down on. So speed absolutely sacrifices quality, and that's something that I definitely don't see changing. I think this is actually going to continue to increase as teams want to go to market quicker, maybe without the right tooling or approach to support it. So this was a really good one. And this actually is another one that really surprised me. This idea, high-tech, low integration, we have a lot of tools and a lot of things available. And of the survey response here, they rate their tools integration like 62 out of 100. I mean, this is really overall that the tech stack integration and the tools that they're using, they're not very cohesive. This actually is fairly surprising to me in a lot of areas where we have very robust integrations. Again, I'll speak from the TestRail perspective. TestRail CLI is like an agnostic way for us to integrate a whole slew of variety of automation and test tooling, DevOps orchestration, and you can leverage that pretty much anywhere, right? I do a lot of work in that area for TestRail. Teams outside of even our tech stack have a ton of tooling available, even in the open source market, where you can do a lot of integration using free tooling. And yet teams still have a lot of technology, high tech, but with the kind of the headline here, low integration, low cohesion, where you're running automation independently, maybe running it locally, not in CI pipelines, lacking aggregation of results and dashboards. So one of the areas I would say to challenge are what are you looking at for a combined suite or integration of products, and how are you going to bring those together? Because right now we're still seeing a lot of our survey respondents not using or having a lot of cohesion in their tooling, where that those availability of products is definitely there. So definitely rethink when you're building your frameworks. But this was a really interesting one.
Surprising and not so surprising, but still a lot of very interesting data points here with this survey. A lot of maybe thinking to do, how to do better going forward. And looking at the data and bringing all of your knowledge from the interactions you have with the customers, what do you have any predictions you can share with us for the next year?
I definitely have some insights, and it's not really even my opinion. I think it's leveraging some of the data that we heard, right? A lot of teams are looking to find their place when it comes to AI. So a lot of people are getting into cycles of adoption and exploration, but I think we're still going to continue to see mixed sentiment on where we could provide immediate ROI in the short term for AI integration. But I think that the need there is we need to start doing that exploration. So I think you're going to see more teams doing exploration and adoption of AI into their processes to then start to drive ROI, not on the long term, but even the short term. Um, One of my other predictions, Joao, and I think it was good that we noted this, is around release cycles. Both from the report and my own experience with, like I said, talking to like hundreds and hundreds of some of the people on this call or new or existing teams for our SEMBI products and industry, is release cycles are going to continue to get faster. Teams that have released monthly next year, maybe they're going to look at a bi-weekly, or maybe they're going to even build more infrastructure for continuous CI/CD, kind of continuous delivery type models to release daily, maybe weekly. So I think we're going to see release cycles getting faster, and tooling is going to be built out more to support that. And then I think the last thing that I'll mention here for predictions before I'll turn it back over to you, is this whole idea of actual KPIs and how we're tracking things. Whenever we start integrating new tooling, I think it's really important that organizations realize, and I think they're seeing it, when we bring new things in like AI, release cycles, go to market times, we want to start to like track the effectiveness of these new processes. So I think we're going to see more of a focus on reporting and KPIs to just see how these tools are actually impacting our processes and businesses. And again, that's consistent with my calls and support and industry feedback in addition to the report. So I think those are really three things to be thinking of, and I think it aligns with the themes that you were talking about, Joel.
Yeah, absolutely. And the just commenting on what you were saying, if you have faster release cycles, you need to have all of the pieces of the puzzle working together. Like the bit you touched on the tool integration, more and better reporting, because otherwise it's just really not scalable, regardless of, leadership wants faster release cycles, but then like you touched on, the speed could sacrifice quality, right? So those are all moving pieces. They're all moving together. Another element that you didn't cover right now, but you alluded to on one of the sessions you and I were together were about the automation gap and about how, thinking about the usage of automation tools and AI. How do you think this gap will keep increasing as we've seen, or do you think teams can shorten that automation gap?
Yeah, no, I think this is good to point out, and I'll kind of mention a little bit what I talked about before and what you and I mentioned. The automation gap, in my opinion, should be something that teams can really look at closing. And I think one of the big things, and I don't say this too often, but is really looking at available tools and tool selection now. Like I said, semi-portfolio, obviously, we have Ranorex, which is a low-code platform. So teams that don't have, maybe the like large scale kind of development enterprise skill to do a coded solution like Java Selenium, or even JavaScript or node-based stuff like Playwright or Cypress. Playwright's been really popular. Tools like Ranorex. I just did a webinar around TestRigger, one of our partners that does has a full AI platform. So I think that, the trend, in my opinion, if teams really embrace that, is looking at these low-code solutions, as I mentioned, to close the automation gap. I think a lot of teams that have these gaps, it could be a skill set gap where supporting coded frameworks that are complex and essentially full-scale development projects, leveraging low-code platforms, regardless of what the tool is, right? They'll have to do that analysis themselves of finding the right fitment. Can definitely be something next year if teams embrace it, that look at these low and no code platforms, a lot of which uses AI, to close the gap and have a real manageable solution. So I definitely think that's real, Joel.
Appreciate the comment. We're just on time for our Q&A session, which is basically the next portion of our session today.
I just saw one here. So I think one of the ones is Vinod mentions about Jenkins and TestRail integration. Is there any way to have a simplified process for that? We actually have documentation, pretty significant documentation on our support center that Solution Architecture maintains on code examples. We have YAML file examples if you're using Jenkins pipelines. We have script examples for Jenkins freestyle jobs using the CLI, TestRail CLI. So I would encourage you to go and take a look. You should be able to get a Jenkins job up and going in 15 or 20 minutes using the samples. So appreciate the comment. We have a lot of resources there for you. Dan has a question about release frequency. If we have a breakdown by industry that we can present.
So we don't have the industry breakdown this year for the survey. Towards the end of the survey, if anyone is interested, goes through it. Towards the end, it explains who was involved, the type of roles, and the type of teams that they are working with. There's not one specifically to go through to understand the level of interest, but I can definitely follow up with Dan if it's of interest to look into QA processes and cross-reference some industry insights. There's multiple things. Like the survey is a 70-page long piece of document. It's a really long, comprehensive report. We didn't want to overwhelm folks attending today. That's why we dug deep into what kind of helps shape what this team satisfaction, and what are the components of a team that is driving forward and is happy with their processes. When I spoke to previously about that focus on test automation and the efficiency and increasing test coverage, so those are kind of the components more so than the methodology that they operate in. So hopefully that helps Dan kind of understand how we drew these conclusions.
Great. I'll take the next one. I think it's reference what I said at the end from Angus. Angus mentions what for AI tools like TestRigger, do we have any advice for use cases on how to integrate them into 2-week release schedules? Sounds like you're doing Agile Scrum, Angus, and it's a great question. In general, regardless of how you're I'll take a step back from a process perspective. Any automation tooling, and this is just for any of your development, whether it's waterfall, agile, scrum, Kanban, should be integrating as often as you possibly can, right? Every time we run tests, getting good visibility on a dashboard. I mean, for TestRail, we have an integration with TestRigger, so you can run a TestRigger test and it automatically ports this information in a test run, shows you visuals. You can do this very seamlessly, right? So you're able to integrate rapidly and get good results and make decisions of what's passing and failing and create bugs and go through the cycle. So my general advice would be integrate and execute tests as much as you can in alignment with your changes versus let's run it at the beginning, let's run it when we merge a branch halfway through and then at the end, right? Good practice is running automation as frequent as changes are introduced into however you're doing your branching strategy, right? Forget feature flow, or if you're doing feature to master or development branching, we should be running them every time and having a good visibility and organization for the results. Know what results map to what changes. So I think that's a good practice. There is some resources, I think, on our TestRail website and on TestRigger for some of the integrations. So take a look at that, Angus, but good question.
I can take next question from Chris. Also, the most popular AI tools. The the survey answer that the top two are still ChatGPT and the Copilot, GitHub Copilot. There's more. There's a lot more tools. Another one that's really coming up a lot is TestRigger as well. But yeah, go look it up for the full list of AI tools for QA. The survey does answer that.
Yeah, there's another comment I'll take. It's just a brief one. Lost my place from Andre. Talks about our Postman integration. He said there may be something either outdated or missing around our documentation for Postman. Solution architecture manages that. Thank you for the comment. We'll take a look at it. If you go to our support center, I know we have updated scripts and integration. If Postman changed some of their open source stuff, or with Newman, I'll be happy to take a look. So thanks for the feedback. And again, it's something that we update pretty routinely. So go ahead and check back. Feel free to send us any other comments or feedback that you need to on that. We'll be happy to update it. So I have a question from Anita. Talks about, it's a short one, share my insights on shift left. So in short, it's happening pretty rapidly across a lot of teams. So, right now, I think the biggest thing with shift left is common tooling that both developers and software test engineers, QA analysts can use. I also think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of kind of transition not just from coded solutions, but from low code type platforms, meaning multiple people on the team, not just developers, can share a common platform to rapidly generate tests. So, that is definitely something that I see. And I think shift left is something everybody really should embrace to do testing as part of software design versus a byproduct of after development is complete or after a branch is already up. We should be thinking, designing, architecting data, strategy, execution, all of this at the same time where we're actually designing code changes or a system. So good question.
All right, let us wrap up because we're at the top of the hour. Just letting everyone know again. There's further reading to do. We've been talking about the report. You will get an email with all of these links and all of this presentation, and you can see the full report. Explore the benchmarks, goals, challenges, and successes impacting QA. This is our biggest, more in-depth report yet, and we hope you enjoy hearing from your peers and how you're navigating the landscape of modern QA. The last bit of content I ask you guys to look at is the total economic impact study, which follows the stories of real TestRail customers that learn how they accelerate software testing while driving cost savings. And this includes findings such as a 204% ROI over the 3 years. Lastly, you mentioned as well the very, very deep integrations we've got with RunnerX and the intimate relationship at the SEMBI brand level with DesignWise as well. All of the sister brands with TestRail. Having said all of this, I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. Thank you, Chris, for all the insights and the debate. Really happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks,
So
Joel, and thanks for all the participation from everybody. A lot of great questions, and hopefully, this is information you can actually leverage and make some real decisions on your teams. I think that's really the value in this. So, appreciate everybody's participation.